That glass bead in a Viking grave, it came from Egypt, from ancient Egypt. It's a small thing, easy to miss, but it's a key. It opens up a hidden world. It shows us our ancestors were connected across huge distances, long before our history books say they could be. It changes the story. You start to see all of human history not as separate chapters, but as one story, one continuous story of global connection, and it's told by the humblest things, by artifacts, seashells that turn up in the middle of deserts. Spices from India, found with Egyptian pharaohs. These links are everywhere. You start to look for them. You start to see the whole sweep differently. A single rust-red bead, found at Harappa in the Indus Valley. To the eye, it's just carnelian, polished smooth, but under a microscope, through trace element analysis, its chemistry shows something else. The fingerprint doesn't match South Asia. It matches a source thousands of miles west, Mesopotamia. This object crossed mountains and deserts 4,000 years ago. Long before the Silk Road. That's the power of a bead, our first category. They weren't just decoration. They were dense packets of value, of technology, of meaning. An archaeologist, Peter Francis, called beads the first durable articles of commerce. And he was right. Think about it. Small, lightweight, durable. They keep their beauty for millennia. The perfect prehistoric commodity. To trace their journey, there's isotopic sourcing. Every region's geology is different, a unique signature in the stone or the glass. By analyzing the ratios of elements or isotopes inside a bead, researchers can match it to a single source, sometimes a specific valley, a particular mine. That carnelian bead from Harappa becomes a passport, stamped with the invisible chemistry of its Mesopotamian homeland. This trade wasn't random. Certain materials became legendary. Lapis lazuli, a stunning blue stone. It could only come from one remote valley in Afghanistan, and it's found in Egyptian tombs, in Mesopotamian royal graves. Carnelian, prized for its deep red, and then glass, a technology whose recipe was a guarded secret, traded as finished beads, carrying the knowledge of their making across continents. There's one astonishing story, the Indo-Pacific glass bead, tiny, monochrome, often just a few millimeters across, made using a unique drawn glass technique that started in India about 2,000 years ago. Archaeologists find these beads in sites across Southeast Asia, all along the coast of East Africa, even deep in the interior of the continent. That distribution paints a picture. A vast, sophisticated Indian Ocean maritime network, operating centuries before historical records detail it. These beads were more than trinkets. They were units of exchange. Symbols of status, talismans of spiritual power. They moved in the pockets of traders, in the pouches of diplomats, around the necks of leaders, silently weaving a web of connection. So a question, what small personal item do you own today? A piece of jewelry, a keepsake? If a future archaeologist analyzed it, what would it say about global supply chains, about cultural exchange? The bead teaches us to look closely. The smallest objects can hold the largest maps, and this microscopic world of trade prepares us to look at something larger. Something just as commonly ignored in the grand narratives. That bead was stone and glass, a map of material, but taste can be a map too. Black pepper. Found in a place you wouldn't expect, not a kitchen, inside the mummified remains of Ramesses II, an Egyptian pharaoh lodged in the royal nostrils. A funerary ritual over 3,000 years ago. That pepper could only have come from one place, India's Malabar coast, and that tells us something. Long before empires rose and fell around the Mediterranean, ships or caravans were moving flavors from one continent to another. That's our second overlooked artifact. Botanical remains, seeds, pollen, spices, they're the silent cargo. They usually dissolve without a trace, except when they don't. We think of ancient trade as silks, ceramics. Things that last. We don't think about the cinnamon in the cupboard, the peppercorn in the mill, but these were powerful drivers of exploration, of connection. They were lightweight, incredibly valuable, and utterly perishable. Finding them is a small miracle. It requires a different archaeology. Paleoethnobotanists, scientists of ancient plants, they don't just look for whole seeds. They search for microfossils, tiny granules of starch, microscopic pollen, trapped in the calculus on ancient teeth, or embedded in the pores of a broken cooking pot. They analyze residues inside jars, and what they find rewrites maps. Take the clove, a dried flower bud from a tree that only grew on a few islands in what's now Indonesia. For centuries, history books said the clove trade to the west began with the Romans. Then archaeologists found cloves inside a ceramic jar in Syria. A jar dating to 1721 before the Common Era. That's over 3,700 years ago. This single discovery suggests a Southeast Asian connection to the Middle East millennia earlier than anyone thought. How did it get there? We don't know the exact route, but the clove itself is the proof. It sailed or was passed hand to hand across an unimaginable distance. These botanical maps often bypass the Silk Road entirely. They chart monsoon winds across the Indian Ocean or hidden trails through high mountain passes. Their preservation is a gift of extreme environments, the arid desert that dried the Pharaoh's pepper, or waterlogged, oxygen-poor conditions, a bog or an ancient shipwreck. Where organic material, denied decay, sleeps for centuries, consider the economic shockwave of a single flavor. In medieval Europe, pepper was so valuable it was used as currency. To pay rents and taxes, men risked their lives for it. That desire for taste, for the medicinal properties of spices, for the status they conveyed, it fueled economies. It launched fleets, but the story gets stranger. Vanilla, the flavor we associate with desserts, it comes from an orchid native only to Mesoamerica, yet there are hints. Residues in Middle Eastern artifacts from before European contact with the Americas. It's a controversial clue, fragile, but if verified, it points to a possibility that stuns historians. A pre-Columbian exchange across the Pacific, a trade in taste so early it defies our textbooks. Think about the flavor of your last meal, the pepper, the cinnamon. Maybe a hint of clove or nutmeg. Every one is a chapter in a global epic, a story of danger, desire, and discovery carried on the wind and over the waves. These silent seeds built the world we know, and if spices carried the scent of distant lands, another artifact carried their sound, the echo of music traveling across the same vast waters. Archaeologists found ceremonial trumpets in the Andes. They were made from a specific shell, the Spondylus. It's a spiny oyster. It only lives in the warm Pacific waters off Ecuador. To get that shell up into the mountains was a huge journey, hundreds of miles over incredibly difficult terrain. They carried it for its sound and for its color, a sacred blood-red color. When blown, that deep, resonant call would echo across the stone temples, a sound pulled from a distant ocean. So that's the third artifact, musical instruments. Sound objects, we don't usually think of them as trade goods. Weapons, tools, ceramics, sure, but a flute, a drum, a bell, they're carriers of culture. And their materials are maps, maps of impossible connection. You can trace an instrument's design to see cultural interaction, but the physical object itself tells an older story. It's a story of procurement, the quest for the perfect material to make the perfect sound. A ceremonial bell in Southeast Asia needed specific bronze. Tin and copper from specific mines. Trade routes for those materials stretched thousands of miles, and some of those bells have been found in West Africa. which suggests a network more complex than we knew. Ivory for a flute's mouthpiece, a specific rare wood for the body of a stringed instrument, unique metals for symbols with a particular ring. Each material points to a web. Someone knew where to find this special thing. Someone else knew how to move it across continents. Think about the great lyres from ancient Mesopotamia. Found in the royal graves of Ur, they're magnificent, covered in gold and lapis lazuli. That lapis, that blue, could only come from one place, the mountains of Afghanistan. So when a musician plucked those strings over 4,000 years ago, the spectacle and the music both came from a chain of trade, across deserts and mountains. This wasn't just commerce, it was the fusion of luxury and artistry over staggering distances. These instruments were central to ceremony, to power, to the divine. An exotic sound producer made from an exotic material held immense ritual weight. They were diplomatic gifts, signaling alliance and shared sophistication between far-flung rulers. The material proved the king's reach. The sound itself, maybe thought to have magical properties, was an import from a mythic elsewhere. It makes you wonder, what does the music you listen to now say about a global blend of influences? The instruments in a modern orchestra, the digital samples in a pop song. Each one is a descendant of these ancient networks, a testament to our endless borrowing and blending of sound. And if music and spice chart the movement of culture and desire, then the very foundations of society, the tools that built our first cities, they hold their own hidden stories. Stories of global connection. The trumpet sound fades out, but that other sound, stone grinding against grain, that was the constant background noise, the rhythm of getting through the day. In a Viking settlement in Dublin, they found a quern stone, heavy, worn down from use for grinding flour. To most people, it's just a tool, but the rock itself tells you something else. It's basalt, and it comes from the Rhineland, from quarries in Germany. So someone took this incredibly heavy, purely functional object, loaded it onto a ship, sailed it across the North Sea. This wasn't a luxury trade. This was a trade in what you absolutely needed. The fourth artifact, the one we overlook, is the millstone. The quern, that simple, crushing weight that turns grain into food. Think about a baker in Pompeii before the end. The millstone turning in his shop, it wasn't local. It was made from a porous lava, quarried from specific volcanoes hundreds of miles away. That lava stone was valued. Its rough texture ground grain better than local rock could. So it was worth the huge effort to move it. These stones were the engines. Without them, you don't feed a city. Trading them was a trade in stability itself. To trade something that heavy, that ordinary, it shows a deep level of organization. Shipping a ton of stone across open water or dragging it overland, that's a massive investment. It only happens if the routes are secure, if the demand is steady, and if the quality of that foreign stone is clearly, unmistakably better. This was the infrastructure of daily life. Operating quietly underneath the more dramatic stories. Petrographic analysis, looking at thin slices of the stone under a microscope. It lets geologists match these tools to their exact source. A granite quern found in England might trace back to Norway. A lava millstone in France points straight to the Eifel region. Each stone is like a cargo manifest. A shipping label written in minerals. This story repeats. In the Americas, the Maya used flat grinding stones, Metate, often made from volcanic rock traded over long distances. Through complex Mesoamerican networks, the milling technology, the design of the stone, it traveled with the stone itself, a package of knowledge and utility. Monasteries in early medieval Europe, they often had the best millstones, imported from distant quarries because consistent food production was the foundation. The bedrock of those secluded communities. Now look at the appliance in your own kitchen. The blades in a food processor, the plate in a microwave, the motor in a mixer. Every component is sourced from a different corner of the globe. assembled into one tool for making a meal. We're still living by that same principle. We look for the best material for the job, no matter where it is, weaving our daily sustenance from a planetary web. If the millstone sustained the body from the inside, then the next category of artifacts, those were meant to be seen by the outside world. They were statements of identity, worn on the skin itself. That seashell in the desert, it's a message from an ancient ocean. An archaeologist in the southwest, sifting through a trash heap, finds it. A smooth, spiraled Olivella shell, small, delicate, and it came from the Pacific coast, hundreds of miles away. For the people who lived there, the Hohokam, this wasn't trash. It was treasure. They worked these shells and a balloon into ornaments, mosaics, ritual objects. The shell's journey from the sea to the desert is a puzzle. And solving it reveals trade corridors stretching across a continent. These exotic shells, marine products, they're among the oldest traded things we have. Long before ceramics, before metals, people were moving shells for their beauty, their rarity, their spiritual power. Shell trade networks form the earliest skeleton of long-distance exchange. The distribution of a shell type is like dropping dye into water. It shows the currents, the movement. In North America, the Panhandle Archaic Network, over 3,000 years ago, moved shells from the Gulf of Mexico deep into the interior. In the Pacific, the Lapita culture spread across remote islands. Their signature artifact is stamped pottery, but in their sites there are also shells. Tracing voyages across thousands of miles of open ocean, the types of shells tell specific stories. The Cowry shell, with its glossy surface, became one of the world's most widespread forms of money. Cowries from the Maldives, shipped to West Africa, used as currency. The Spondylus, the spiny oyster, was sacred from South America to the Mediterranean. Conuse shells were carved into rings and beads, their value in the craftsmanship and the distant origin. Think of the logistical challenge. These are perishable goods. From a living animal, to transport them inland, they had to be processed, dried, strung onto cords, carried by foot over mountain passes, traded hand to hand across generations. Their value wasn't just decorative. A shell from a distant, mythical sea held power. It connected an inland community to the cosmic force of the ocean. A piece of another world, worn on the body, used in ceremony. So ask yourself, what item do you consider inherently valuable? A precious metal, a gemstone. That might be utterly worthless in another culture, another time. Value is a story we agree to tell. And for millennia, one of the most compelling stories was told by a seashell. But if natural materials like shells charted early curiosity, our next leap was to create new materials, substances that never existed in nature, born from fire and ingenuity. And those substances would weave an even tighter global web. The shell came from the sea, but then you had to make new worlds from earth and fire. There's a shipwreck off the coast of Turkey in the Mediterranean. The Uluburun, it's from the late Bronze Age, 3,000 years old. Its cargo wasn't fine art, it was the engine of its time, lumps of copper and tin. Ebony logs, chunks of raw glass, that's the sixth artifact, industrial raw materials, the unglamorous backbone. We celebrate the finished statue, the polished sword. We ignore the ingot, that heavy brick of metal. On that seafloor, they found copper ingots cast in a stretched oxhide shape that wasn't just for carrying. It was a standardized unit, a Bronze Age currency, each one a known weight, a guaranteed purity. They were building blocks traded across vast distances to workshops. Turned into tools, into treasures. To trace their journeys, scientists use lead isotope analysis. Like a fingerprint, the ore source leaves a unique geological signature in the metal. So a copper ingot found in Sweden can be matched to mines on Cyprus. Tin from Cornwall or Central Asia shows up in a Mycenaean dagger. These lumps are silent couriers. They carry an invisible map of where they came from, This trade required immense organization. Production was centralized. Cyprus was a copper powerhouse. Certain regions controlled the glass sands, the ivory. These raw commodities were shipped to manufacturing hubs, a prehistoric supply chain. A Phoenician merchant didn't sail with finished wine jugs. He sailed with the clay, the pigments, the tin to make 10,000 of them where he landed. The risk was enormous. A ship with tons of copper was a floating fortune. Its loss was an economic disaster, but the reward, arming an army, supplying a kingdom, made it worth it, and the system was efficient, even circular. Take Roman glass. The empire made vast amounts of raw glass in giant furnaces. They'd break this cooled glass into chunks called cullet. Archaeologists find Roman cullet at ports in southern India. Not finished bowls, the raw material. Indian artisans would remelt it to make their own beads, which traveled even farther. A perfect loop. These materials were constantly recycled. A broken bronze statue was melted down. An old glass vessel was crushed and reborn. The ingot in a museum might have been a sword, then a plowshare, then a mirror before being buried. Its life was a cycle. It makes you look at the modern world differently. Hold your smartphone. That sleek casing hides raw material journeys. Lithium from a South American salt flat. Rare earth elements from Africa. Silicon from quartz. Tin from Southeast Asia. It's a miniature Uluburun in your pocket. The culmination of a 100,000-year-old habit. Seeking the perfect raw stuff from the ends of the earth to build what's next. And if these industrial materials built our external world, what about the internal one? The world of spirit, identity, belief. The next artifacts weren't carried in a ship's hold. They were carried close to the heart. That jet amulet in a child's hand. It was carved from a single, rare deposit, a place on the coast of northern England. But you find this same dark, polished stone in graves and homes all across the Roman Empire. It traveled as a precious sliver, a piece of protection. This is the seventh category, the amulet, the talisman. These small objects of faith that moved with people may be the most intimate artifact of global trade. Spices flavored food, stones ground grain, but these objects were meant to guard the soul. They were personal religion, portable, and their distribution, it maps the movement of belief. Take the Egyptian Eye of Horus, made from a brilliant blue faience, a symbol of healing and protection, found in households from Greece to Mesopotamia. It wasn't just an import, it was an idea. The trade in these sacred objects became a conduit for spiritual concepts. A merchant might carry a pocketful of amulets, selling not just an artifact but a promise, safety from a foreign god. These objects often traveled faster than missionaries, faster than holy texts. They were ambassadors of faith. The style and material of a talisman are a biography. A Buddhist figurine crafted in the monasteries of India ends up in a Viking hoard. Beside silver coins, its journey is written in its form. It likely moved north along the river routes, the Volga, traded and retraded, until its serene expression fascinated a Norse chieftain. Continents away, he may not have known the Buddha's teachings, but he recognized power in that carved stone. Common materials tell stories. Amber, fossilized resin that feels warm to the touch. Mined from the Baltic coast, traded south to the Mediterranean, where it was believed to hold medicinal properties. Specific stones were selected for their colors. Lapis lazuli, carnelian, each hue associated with a different celestial protection. Their function was often apotropaic, meant to ward off evil or medicinal. Worn to cure illness to ensure safe travel, this trade led to cultural blending. A Roman intaglio, a gemstone engraved with a classical god, it might be lost. Centuries later, an Anglo-Saxon craftsperson finds it. They don't see a forgotten emperor, they see a powerful, mysterious image. They set it into a new piece of jewelry. A brooch, and it becomes a protective heirloom in a new culture. The original meaning transforms, but the object's sacred power endures. So what about you? Do you carry a lucky charm, a pendant, a stone, a coin? Think of its possible journey, the metals mined from one continent, shaped in another, sold on a third. Your personal token is part of this ancient chain, seeking comfort from the wider world, this spiritual commerce woven into daily life, and that leads us to the literal fabrics. The very clothes people wore. The cloth around the child with the amulet, it has a secret of its own. In the linen wrapping an Egyptian mummy, a scientist detected traces of silk proteins. Microscopic, this mummy is 1,000 years older than the Silk Road we know. That one fiber, invisible, changes the timeline. It means the desire for silk, that ultimate luxury, was crossing continents long before the caravans. That's the 8th artifact, textile fibers and dyes. The most fragile evidence. Cloth rots, it burns, it turns to dust. But sometimes through chemistry or climate, a fragment survives. And in that fragment is a map. A textile archaeologist said analyzing a dye is like reading a chemical fingerprint for trade. Every color tells a journey. That regal purple on a scrap from a Celtic chieftain's tomb, it didn't come from local berries. Advanced analysis matches it to the rare murex sea snail. Harvested only on the Phoenician coast, hundreds of miles across the sea. To get that color, someone traded across that entire distance for a single, potent hue. The ancient world chased color with an obsession. Madder root from Anatolia gave a vibrant red. Indigo from a plant in India gave the world blue. Cochineal, a tiny insect on cactus in the Americas, produced the most potent red. When the Spanish saw it, they knew its value instantly. It became a global commodity, shipped to Europe in vast quantities, coloring the robes of cardinals and the coats of soldiers. The trade in dyes was a trade in power. Controlling a color source was like controlling a gold mine. But it wasn't just dyes, it was the fibers. Luxury fibers traveled incredible distances. Silk from China, fine wools from specific sheep in places like Miletus, cotton, first domesticated in the Indus Valley and South America, spreading slowly. These weren't just materials, they were technologies. The knowledge of how to weave them traveled too. The drawloom, a complex machine for weaving patterns, seems to have moved from east to west along the same routes as the silk it wove. A trade in technique. Sometimes the evidence is humbler. In prehistoric alpine Europe, there's cloth made from nettle fiber, stinging nettles, harvested, processed, spun into a strong thread. And this nettle cloth is found far from where the plants grew, showing a robust regional trade in practical textiles long before exotic imports. Think about the shirt on your back. The cotton might be from one continent, dyed with chemicals from another, woven on machines designed in a third, sewn in a fourth. You're wearing a map of the modern world. A direct descendant of those ancient networks that moved murex purple and Chinese silk. From the fabrics that covered the body, the story turns to the artifacts that covered the distances. The vehicles that made this silent, planet-spanning conversation possible. That rivet in an Irish field, it's a signature. A Viking ship was taken apart there, far from the coast. Its pieces were reused, but the rivet stayed, a stubborn clue. The ship itself was the artifact everyone overlooked, not just the cargo, but its bones. The planks, the sails, the ropes, those were the highways, and their parts, they chart the spread of the technology that shrank the world. The lateen sail is a perfect triangle. It catches the wind from any angle. That design didn't come from the Mediterranean. It was born in the Indian Ocean. Arab and Indian sailors mastered it first. Then it traveled west. Mediterranean cultures adopted it. It became the engine of exploration, letting ships sail against the wind, letting them venture into the open Atlantic. That one innovation, moving along trade routes, it changed history. It wasn't traded as a good, it was traded as knowledge, an idea encoded in rope and cloth. Nautical archaeologists, they don't just study shipwrecks, they study the scattered pieces, an anchor of a specific shape found far from its home port that marks a shipping lane. A steering oar design from the Baltic found in a Russian riverbank that shows the path of inland waterways. These are the fingerprints of connection. Ship construction was a language. The Mediterranean spoke in mortise and tenon, a meticulous, interlocking joinery like a wooden puzzle sealed with pitch. Strong but heavy, the Norse spoke in clinker, overlapping planks riveted together, lighter, more flexible for northern seas, and where these two worlds met in trading ports, the techniques blended. A hybrid vessel might have a clinker-built hull with mortise and tenon decking, a floating testament to cultural exchange. The materials tell their own stories. Cedar from Lebanon was legendary. Its resinous wood resisted rot. Pharaohs demanded it for their solar boats. Kings across the ancient Near East sought it. Its trade supported entire economies. You can trace the reach of Phoenician merchants by cedar fragments in foreign shipyards. Then there's the humble tar. Used to waterproof seams, chemical analysis can now source tar to specific regions. Tar from Scandinavia found on a ship in the Black Sea that paints a picture. Maintenance stops, repairs along a vast network. Ports were the synapses of this system. The discovery of massive, standardized stone anchors in the Red Sea, of a design used in the Indian Ocean that shows where the networks linked. Roman-era pottery made in India found in Oman. It didn't fly there, it sailed on a ship, built with Indian teak, perhaps using techniques learned from Arab sailors. The ship was the melting pot. Navigational knowledge was the most precious cargo. The understanding of monsoon winds, the star charts, the depth soundings. This wasn't written down for centuries. It was passed from pilot to pilot. The distribution of certain tools, like the astrolabe or specific sounding weights, it maps the routes of this silent, professional brotherhood. They guided ships through peril based on knowledge gathered over generations. So what modern innovation will future archaeologists point to? Not the smartphone. The standardized shipping container, that uniform steel box, it reshaped the planet's economic geography as profoundly as the Latin sail. It is our era's rivet, our cedar plank. The unglamorous backbone of global connection. And just as ships carried spices and silk, they carried something even more transformative in their holds. Not just goods or even shipbuilding techniques, but thoughts, ideas captured in symbols. The final artifacts are the most fragile of all. They are marks on a surface. A ship's manifest written on a palm leaf, pepper, silk, a parrot. It was a receipt for a world already in motion. That's the written record, the most fragile evidence and often the most direct. A broken piece of pottery found in an Egyptian outpost. It's a grocery list in Greek, but the ink itself, analyzed later, shows a secret ingredient. Gallnuts from a specific oak. That tree only grew in one place, China, so the ink on that Greek list in Egypt came from Asia. The medium itself was a traded good. That's the paper trail. Long before corporations, there were systems. The Silk Road wasn't just a path. It was a managed network with way stations, caravanserais that worked like ancient post offices. They kept tallies, records on wood, on leather. They noted merchants' names, the goods, the taxes paid, administrative documents completely practical. And their survival in the dry sands gives us a ledger. Paleographers, the handwriting scholars, they see more than words. They see the story in the script. A single document from a trading hub might have seals in Chinese, Sogdian, Tibetan. The handwriting styles blend, scribes who were multilingual working in a bustling post. This was the bureaucracy of connection. It made trust possible across thousands of miles. Take the Taxila copper plate from ancient Pakistan. It's an inscription, a formal grant. It records a donation of land to a community of international merchants. It names them, It legally protects their right to trade. This wasn't a chance encounter. It was a sanctioned, systematic welcome. The trade in writing materials fueled the system: papyrus from Egypt, parchment from Anatolia, and then paper, whose technology spread slowly from China across the Islamic world into Europe. Each new material made record-keeping cheaper, more widespread. In every port there were scribes and translators, essential middlemen. They turned spoken deals into written contracts. They wrote letters of credit. A merchant from Cairo could give a piece of paper to a partner in India who could claim goods from a local agent. That slip of paper, backed by reputation and a network of trust, was as powerful as gold. The most astonishing archive might be the Cairo Geniza, a room in a synagogue where worn-out Jewish documents, too sacred to throw away, were stored for 1,000 years. It's a time capsule. Among prayers and poems are business letters, court records, shopping lists. They detail the daily life of medieval trade across the Mediterranean into the Indian Ocean. A letter from a merchant in India to his brother in Egypt complains about the price of pepper, sends regards to a friend in Sicily. A snapshot of a globalized community linked by faith, family, and commerce. These documents often point to the most vital trade, not spices or silks but sustenance. The waystation tallies recorded shipments of grain. The Geniza letters haggled over wheat and lentils. The movement of food to feed cities and armies along these routes was the constant, urgent background hum of the entire system. So consider your own digital footprint. Your emails, your receipts, your stored photos. Future historians might see them as our era's ostraka. Fragile bits of data that, pieced together, reveal the map of how we lived, traded, connected. They are the latest chapter in the oldest story. The story of leaving a mark to say, I was here, we traded, we connected. The ink on those manifests had the pepper, the silk. But the taste of the scribe's meal while he wrote, that's a different record. That one's written in molecules. There was a crust inside a 5,000-year-old cooking pot found in Britain. Burnt residue, they scraped it and analyzed the chemistry, and they found traces of something that shouldn't have been there: turmeric and ginger, spices from South Asia. That pot was used millennia before any known contact. That's the power of paleodietary evidence, the silent story of what people ate and where it came from. Now bioarchaeologists look at the calculus on ancient teeth that hardened plaque. They find microfossils in it, starches, pollen, even proteins. In skeletons from the Bronze Age Levant, they found traces of soy and banana. Plants domesticated in East and Southeast Asia, finding them in the Mediterranean, that long ago it whispers of connections we're just starting to map. This science reads the chemistry of life itself. Isotopic analysis of human bones, it doesn't just show what someone ate, it can show a lifetime of change. The strontium and oxygen isotopes in your tooth enamel, they're locked in during childhood. They record the geology of your homeland. The carbon and nitrogen isotopes in your bones, they tell the story of your adult diet. So scientists can find an individual buried in Egypt and their bones tell a tale of two continents, a childhood eating millet from the African Sahel, an adulthood consuming wheat and barley from the Mediterranean. That's a biography of movement, likely driven by trade networks or shifting alliances. It's a personal passport written in chemistry. Then there are phytoliths, tiny, durable silica bodies that form inside plant cells. They're like microscopic skeletons. When a plant decays, these phytoliths remain in the soil for millennia. Each plant family, sometimes each species, produces phytoliths of a distinct shape. So in the soil of an ancient village in Central Asia, finding rice phytoliths when the local grain was millet, that's a clue. It points to contact with East Asia. The trade in staple crops that was perhaps the most profound exchange of all. Maize from Mesoamerica, slowly moving north. wheat and barley from the Fertile Crescent, spreading across Europe and Asia. These weren't luxury items, they were the foundations of civilization. Their movement reshaped populations, economies, landscapes. This evidence reveals a trade in taste that included the very basics. Fermented foods and beverages, cheese, yogurt, beer, wine, their production techniques traveled with the ingredients. A recipe is a technology. The discovery of Black Death-era peppercorns in London, it's a stark reminder. Even during one of history's most devastating periods of loss, the spice trade persisted. The human desire for flavor, for variety, for the comfort of a familiar taste in an unfamiliar land, it proved resilient. Think of the ingredients in your favorite meal: the tomato, native to the Americas, the pasta, whose wheat came from the Middle East, the cheese, its ancestors from Central Asia. You're eating a map of ancient trade routes, a story of global connection that fueled empires and outlasted plagues. This sustenance, this daily act of eating, it provided the energy for everything else. It powered the merchants, fed the artists, sustained the cultures that would produce the most deliberate artifacts of all, objects created not for use, purely for meaning. That daily meal, blending continents, gave people the energy to create, not just tools but beauty. The 12th artifact isn't something you can hold. It's a visual echo, a pattern, a style. There's a tapestry from ancient Peru, woven centuries before Columbus. It shows a mythical serpent, coiling, scaled with fierce claws. And to any art historian, it looks startlingly like a Chinese dragon, separated by the whole Pacific Ocean. How do such similar visions appear? That's the puzzle of artistic diffusion. The silent trade in ideas carried on the wind of commerce. For over 1,000 years across the Eurasian steppes, a distinct animal-style art flourished. You see it in golden Scythian belt buckles from the Black Sea, in intricate Celtic metalwork from Britain, and in bronze ornaments from the borders of China. All of them show stylized, intertwined animals, predators and prey, creatures locked in eternal, decorative combat. These cultures probably never met. But the style traveled along the threads of the steppe trade routes, through the movement of small, portable luxury goods. A nomad's decorated saddle might inspire a local metalworker hundreds of miles away. The idea was the cargo, not the object. One art historian called style a virus of ideas. It spreads through contact, along trade routes. It finds new hosts and adapts. Specific motifs become global citizens. The lotus flower was a sacred symbol of rebirth in ancient Egypt. It floated eastward, was adopted, transformed. Became central to Buddhist and Hindu iconography in India. The griffin, a creature with the body of a lion and the head of an eagle. It starts in the art of the ancient Near East. Then strides westward, becomes a guardian figure in Greek mythology. In Minoan palace frescoes, this transmission happened a few ways, sometimes through model books. Sketchbooks carried by itinerant artists, filled with patterns of flowers, beasts, geometric designs. A merchant or pilgrim might carry one, and its pages would seed new artistic traditions in far-off workshops. Royal seals were another way, used to stamp documents or goods. They carried official iconography across empires. When a seal impressed wax in a foreign court, it left more than an authentication. It left an image to be copied, a style to be admired. Often, the most powerful vector was the diplomatic gift. A king sends a magnificent carved ivory chest to a neighboring ruler. That chest is admired, studied. Local artisans are commanded to replicate its style for the local court. The object itself might be kept in a treasury. But its aesthetic influence seeps into the local culture, and this shows a crucial difference. We've traced the trade of objects, spices, beads, metals. But the trade of ideas, of pure aesthetics, is a separate layer, a profound one. It shows a connection beyond economics. It's about a shared human fascination with form and symbol and story. The most dramatic example might be in ancient Gandhara, in what's now Pakistan and Afghanistan. For centuries after Alexander the Great's campaigns, this region was a crossroads. Buddhist monks and Greek-influenced artists met there. The result was a revolution in sacred art. Before this, the Buddha was rarely shown in human form. He was represented by symbols, a footprint, an empty throne, a bodhi tree, but under the influence of Hellenistic traditions, with their mastery of human anatomy and flowing drapery, the first iconic statues of the Buddha were born. The serene face, the graceful robes, these owe a debt to the classical art of the Mediterranean, filtered through Central Asian trade routes. It was a fusion that shaped the visual language of half the world. So you can look around now at the design of the device you're using, the pattern on your furniture, the logo on a product. Can you trace the lineage of its curves, its shapes? That minimalist aesthetic might have roots in Japanese Zen, popularized through mid-century European trade. Our visual world is a palimpsest, a layered document of these ancient artistic conversations. And the most deliberate agents of these conversations were often the most exquisite objects, exchanged not in markets but in palaces. The giraffe was a living wonder. Sent from the African coast to the Ming Emperor's court, a creature of myth made real, it was a diplomatic marvel, not trade for profit but for power. The 13th artifact is the diplomatic gift, the royal prestige item. These exchanges were the glittering surface. They formalized the connections. They made everything else possible. The earliest records are the Amarna Letters, clay tablets from the 14th century before the Common Era. Correspondence between the Egyptian pharaoh and the rulers of Babylon, Assyria, the Hittites. The language is one of brotherhood, lavish exchange, gold, ebony, ivory, royal marriages. A princess sent from one court to another was the ultimate pledge. These weren't simple presents, they were political instruments, a carefully calibrated system, a formalized language of international relations. The value of the gift signaled status. It signaled esteem. It was a bond, a non-aggression pact, a trade agreement, all in one. A successful gift exchange smoothed the path for merchants. It guaranteed safe passage. It was the elite framework, the framework upon which common commerce was built. The materials were always the rarest, ivory from African elephants, from Mesopotamian hippos. Exotic timbers, cedar, sandalwood, jewel-encrusted weapons never meant for battle. Live animals were the ultimate display, the giraffe for China, elephants for Persian kings. Polar bears from Norway to the courts of Europe. Their journey was a spectacle. It proved the giver's reach. Ceremonies surrounded these exchanges, public displays of generosity. They were exercises in soft power. The object was then recorded in royal annals on temple walls. That lion from the Hittite king is carved into an Egyptian monument. That's our paper trail, a documented point of contact. It often predates the archaeological evidence for broader trade. These objects had long afterlives. A fine Byzantine silk robe given to a Frankish chieftain might be worn for generations. It created an insatiable demand for the material in the West. That spurred later commercial efforts to obtain it, or it could be looted in war, entering a new cycle of gifting or sale, spreading farther from its origin. The intricate gold and enamel cups that moved between Mongol khans and European emissaries, they were tokens of a terrifying peace. Their survival in a treasury tells us that dialogue was happening. However tense, it was happening across the continent, so the modern equivalent, the exchange of cultural artifacts between nations today, a space mission patch gifted between agencies. A rare manuscript returned as a gesture of goodwill. These are the descendants of the Amarna Letters. They build the framework within which everything else flows. And to make that everyday flow possible, to turn a royal gift of ivory into a marketplace transaction, that required one final, humble invention, a tool of absolute trust. A hematite cube fits right in your hand, black, polished, smooth. It was found at Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley. It weighs exactly 1 unit, and that same unit shows up on identical cubes from Mesopotamia. They match across 1,000 miles of desert and mountains. That's the 14th artifact, the weight, the measure, the physical guarantee of fairness. Without that, long-distance trade just falls apart into suspicion. In an Indian port, they found Roman balance weights, little lead discs with official stamps. They're far from home, buried in foreign soil. Their presence is a quiet revolution. It means a merchant from the Mediterranean could sail to India, set up his scales, and do business. Because both sides agreed on what a unit of weight meant, they shared a grammar, a shared language for commerce. This is the infrastructure of trust. Standardized weights measuring rods, certified containers for volume. They're the tools that translate value across languages. An economic historian called metrology the grammar of commerce. It's the fundamental syntax that lets an economic sentence be formed. When you see the same weight standard, like the shekel or the Islamic dirham, across a huge region, you're not just seeing trade. You're seeing formal agreement, cultural influence, a sustained conversation that required everyone to speak the same numerical language. The materials they chose for weights tell a story. Dense stones like hematite or basalt because they resist wear, bronze and lead which could be cast precisely and stamped with official marks, their evolution records centralizing power. Royal authorities often took control of the standards, issuing official weights to stop fraud and secure taxes. In the ports and caravan cities, merchant guilds became the enforcers. They maintained the standard weights, settled disputes, policed their members. Their reputation for fairness was their most valuable asset. Think of the Chinese sisi. Those boat-shaped silver ingots. Their value wasn't just the metal, but their recognized form and purity. A sisi ingot from a trusted assayer could be accepted across Southeast Asia without being melted down. Its shape was its certificate, a pre-coin currency built on a trusted measurement of weight and quality. This framework is so embedded now we barely see it. The global metric system, the calibrated scales in every store, the precise specs for a shipping container. These are our era's hematite cubes. They let a phone designed in California with parts from 3 continents be assembled in a 4th and sold in a 5th. Because every engineer, every manufacturer agrees on what a millimeter is. This invisible lattice of agreed-upon measurement made the whole system fluid. It let value be quantified, compared, exchanged, and that ability to quantify value led to one of our most consequential inventions, the leap from weighing silver dust to striking a coin. That weight in your hand, it meant a fair trade, but then you have this small, stamped piece of metal, a Roman silver denarius found buried in the soil of southern India. Far outside the empire's reach, and yet there it is. That's the 15th artifact, coinage, proto-currency. These little discs, they're more than money. They're concentrated packets, political authority, economic trust, raw material. Their journeys, they map a world already financially integrated. A single Aksumite gold coin, minted in ancient Ethiopia, turns up in a hoard in Sri Lanka. A Byzantine gold solidus, the dollar of its day, found in a tomb in China. These aren't lost souvenirs, they're evidence, monetary spheres touching, value systems recognizing each other across vast divides. Numismatists, the scholars of coins, they don't just catalog them, they read them like a detective story. The distribution of a coin type shows the reach of an economy's influence. But more than that, it shows the flow of bullion, the raw silver and gold. That was the lifeblood of ancient trade. Coins often traveled not as coins, but as convenient lumps of precious metal. This is where you see hack silver, a Viking hoard might contain beautiful Islamic dirhams and also chopped up pieces of those same coins, cut into halves. Quarters, fragments, they weren't spending the coin's face value. They were spending its weight in silver that created a hybrid system. In a market in Scandinavia, a merchant might pay with a hacked piece of a dirham, a whole Frankish denier, and a bit of raw silver jewelry, all weighed together on a scale. The coin's original king was irrelevant. Its metal was everything. This demand for raw material, it fueled entire industries. Silver mines in Afghanistan supplied the Islamic world, whose dirhams then flowed north to become Viking silver. Gold from West African empires eventually found its way into the coins of medieval Europe. The coin was the end product, a mining and refining network that spanned continents. Sometimes the idea of the coin traveled faster than the coins themselves. Ancient Greek city-states produced magnificent silver coins, like the Athenian owl tetradrachm. Its image of an owl became so synonymous with reliable silver that it was imitated for centuries. Local rulers in Egypt, in the Persian Empire, even in the Arabian Peninsula, they struck their own versions of the Athenian owl. They were borrowing the credibility of a foreign symbol to bolster their own economy. And before metal coins, societies used other forms, commodity money. Cacao beans in Mesoamerica, standardized bolts of cloth in the Andes, cowry shells across Africa and Asia. These were all agreed upon stores of value. Functioning as currency within their trade networks, they show the concept of money, a trusted medium of exchange. It's a human invention. It appears independently and then it connects. So look in your own drawer, a few coins from a past trip, a foreign currency you never exchanged, that Canadian loonie, that Japanese yen. They are the direct descendants of those Roman denarii in India. Tiny ambassadors of a global system that agrees for a moment that this piece of metal or paper represents value. They are the solidified flow of trust. But coins and shells, they're one thing. They move because people move them, and those moving people, the merchants, the sailors, the migrants, they left behind the most intimate evidence of all. Not in their pockets, in their very bones. The Roman latrine wasn't just for waste, it preserved a microscopic world. Scientists found eggs there from intestinal parasites. Things that cause dysentery. These tiny hardened capsules are biological artifacts. They tell us what illnesses traveled, what moved with merchants and soldiers along the trade routes. That's the 16th category, the biological and genetic trace, the most intimate evidence and the most overlooked. It's the story written in DNA, in parasites, in the cells of the people and animals and plants that moved. A paleogeneticist pointed out that the spread of a livestock breed, like zebu cattle from India into Africa, that's not just an economic event. It's a map of cultural preference and environmental adaptation carried right in the animal's genes. This science reads the movement of life itself. Take ancient human remains from a port city. By sequencing even fragments of DNA, researchers can detect ancestry from very distant regions. An individual buried in Rome might carry genetic markers pointing to East Asia. This isn't about massive invasions, it's about the quiet journeys, cumulative journeys of individuals, traders who settled, sailors who married, families who relocated along the networks of commerce. Their biological legacy is the ultimate proof of connection, and this extends to the pathogens they carried. Diseases like leprosy or tuberculosis, they have their own genetic history. By sequencing ancient bacterial genomes from skeletons, scientists can trace the lineage of the illness. They can see how specific strains moved from Asia into Europe during periods of heightened trade. The microbe's journey mirrors the merchant's route. It's a shadow history of contact, written in the most unexpected ink. The trade in live animals reshaped continents. The horse, domesticated on the steppes, became the engine of empires from Persia to Rome. The camel, essential for deserts, was a traded technology in itself. Each breeding population carried a genetic signature which spread and mixed with local herds, but it wasn't just the intended cargo that moved. Commensal species moved. The rats, the mice, the insects, they stowed away in grain sacks and ship holds. The black rat spread across the entire Roman world, a silent, unwelcome passenger on the ships carrying grain and pottery. Its genetic distribution today still reflects those ancient shipping lanes. Port cities became genetic melting pots. The constant arrival of people from different worlds led to population mixing. It left a clear mark in the DNA of their descendants. This biological blending is a direct result of those economic and social networks. It's a layer of connection deeper than any traded good. It's in the blood. You might have your own DNA story, a trace of ancestry from a distant continent, from a modern test. That narrative of ancient journeys is part of the same epic. It's the legacy of the same routes that moved spices and silk, that carried ideas and faiths. And often, this profound biological and cultural mixing was helped along by a specific kind of trade. The trade in substances that could alter the mind, that could open doors to the spirit, things sought not for the body but for the consciousness. That residue in the ceremonial pipe, it points to a kind of sacred geography. There was a clay vessel from Choco Canyon in the American Southwest. Scientists found traces of something that shouldn't have been there. Theobromine, which is the chemical signature for cacao, the chocolate plant, and that plant is only native to the tropical lowlands of Mesoamerica, over 1,000 miles to the south. That's our 17th artifact, psychoactive substances, ritual substances, the trade in things that could alter the mind or heal the body or bridge a gap to the spirit world. These weren't casual goods, they were keys to other realms, and their movement created some of the most profound networks, the most exclusive networks. Anthropologists point out that controlling these substances often meant controlling access to the divine. The knowledge, where to find them, how to prepare them, the rituals for their use, that became the domain of priests, of shamans, of elites. This was trade as a form of sacred technology. Take that pipe from Ohio. It was carved from a single sacred red stone that was quarried hundreds of miles away in Minnesota. The pipe was a delivery system for tobacco, which is itself a powerful ritual plant, one that may have traveled from its origins in South America. So the object and its contents together, they formed a complete spiritual toolkit. Assembled from across a continent, modern residue analysis, it lets archaeologists read these invisible inventories. By studying the microscopic chemical leftovers inside a ritual cup or the lining of a pouch, they can detect the fingerprints of specific plants. Nicotine from tobacco, caffeine from Yopon holly or from tea, alkaloids from powerful visionary plants. This reveals a hidden commerce, a commerce in consciousness. A trade that moved not just goods but entire experiences. Think about the incense route, that long, arduous path, frankincense and myrrh. These are resins tapped from specific trees in the arid regions of southern Arabia, the Horn of Africa. Their smoke was believed to carry prayers to the heavens. They were essential for temple rituals. From Egypt to Babylon to Rome, the demand was immense. And the trade routes that carried these fragrant tears across the deserts, they were protected, they were taxed, they were fought over. Their value was purely in their scent. In their sacred symbolism, other substances traveled similar paths. Peyote, a small cactus with potent psychoactive properties. It was traded from its limited range in northern Mexico, deep into the American Southwest for ceremonial use. Opium from the poppy moved along early Silk Road networks, valued as medicine and for its mind-altering effects. In South America, you find intricate snuff trays and tubes for inhaling hallucinogenic powders often made from the Varrola tree. These have been found distributed across the Amazon basin into the Andes. The elaborate paraphernalia itself became a traded item, a sign of ritual knowledge and of status. This history, it's woven into our most daily rituals. That morning cup of coffee or tea. The caffeine is a mild psychoactive substance. Its global journey began in sacred contexts, in medicinal contexts, in Ethiopia, in China. Before it became the fuel for modern life, we're still participating in that ancient exchange. Seeking a shift in our state of mind from a plant that crossed oceans, these sacred exchanges, they required more than just trails, they required trust. They often required formal guarantees, safe passage. The movement of such powerful materials, it was facilitated by the artifacts we've already seen. Diplomatic gifts, standardized weights, symbols of alliance. To transport something that could open a doorway to the gods, you needed more than a merchant's promise. You needed the backing of shared ritual or the protection of a powerful patron. That framework of trust built on tangible objects, it allowed the intangible to flow. Faith, vision, healing to flow across the known world, connecting the inner landscapes of distant cultures as surely as spices connected their kitchens. A piece of terra sigillata pottery found in a Roman frontier fort. It's stamped with a maker's mark from a workshop in Gaul. That stamp isn't just a brand. It's a promise of quality, something a soldier from a distant province would recognize. It's a piece of home, a piece of trust carried in the clay. That's the 18th artifact. Heraldic markers, identity markers, seals, signet rings, standardized pottery stamps, personal ornaments. These were the visual signatures that moved with people. They announced who you were, who you represented, in a world of strangers and foreign languages. In a Mongolian caravanserai, a knight's seal ring from medieval Europe would be a complete mystery. Its heraldic symbols, lions and fleurs de lis, that language would be utterly alien, but its presence there tells a story. A crusader turned mercenary, maybe. Or a diplomatic envoy traveling incredible distances. That ring was his legal identity. Pressed into wax, it authenticated documents. It sealed letters of credit. It guaranteed his word. A sigillographer, a scholar of seals, described them as the passports of the pre-modern world. The credit cards, a form of international legal identification that worked beyond language. These markers built trust in alien markets. A merchant from Venice arrives in Alexandria. He isn't known, but his guild's seal on a letter of introduction is known. That symbol, recognized by other merchants in the network, grants him access to warehouses, to credit, to partners. It was a system built on reputation, made visible. The distribution of these objects maps the movement of people, not just goods. A distinctively shaped fibula, a brooch for a cloak found in a foreign grave. It can pinpoint the wearer's origin. It signals migration or mercenary service or intermarriage between elite families. These personal items were silent announcements of belonging. The trade extended to the tools of identity themselves. Archaeologists find blank seal matrices, often made of high-quality stone or metal, found far from where they were made. These were likely traded to local elites or merchants in distant regions, who would then have their own personal symbols engraved onto them. This created a blend. A matrix carved in a Byzantine style but bearing the name of a Khazar chieftain. A fusion of technology and personal affiliation. Merchant marks served a similar purpose. Simple geometric designs burned into crates painted on pottery. They identified ownership during long, multi-stage journeys. They were the barcodes of the ancient shipping lane. Making sure your cargo could be tracked across many hands. Maybe the most deliberate example is Chinese porcelain made for export. Beautiful blue and white vases. Fired in the kilns of Jingdezhen but painted with Arabic calligraphy, with floral patterns suited to Middle Eastern tastes. The object itself was Chinese. But its decoration was a targeted identity marker, signaling it was made for a specific market, for a specific cultural aesthetic, an artifact that wore its hybrid purpose. So what single item do you carry that would represent your identity to a stranger in a distant land? A driver's license, a university ring, the logo on your T-shirt. This is our modern heraldry, our seals, the curated signals we use to navigate a globalized world, building little bridges of recognition and this framework of visual trust. This system of recognized symbols, it was essential for the next great exchange. It allowed for the movement of something more valuable than porcelain or silver. It allowed for the trade of knowledge itself, the recipes, the blueprints, the techniques that built civilizations. The shape of a blacksmith's tongs, it's like a language. Archaeologists found a pair at a Norse settlement on the edge of North America. The curve of the jaws, the balance of the handle, it's a perfect match for tools from Scandinavia. That's not just a lost object, it's a transferred skill. The overlooked artifact is the tool kit itself, the implement. These are the carriers of practical knowledge. When a new tool design spreads, it's not just commerce. It's a silent tutorial moving across a continent. Take the socketed bronze axe. Before that, axes were often flat, lashed to a handle. The socketed design changed everything. You cast the axe head with a hollow socket, then wedge a sturdy wooden handle into it, stronger, more reliable. A revolutionary piece of engineering, and this specific design appears in Central Europe. Then it travels east across the steppes into China. That distribution map shows more than trade in finished axes. It shows the trade of the idea for the axe, the knowledge of how to cast it. The mold patterns likely traveled with metalworkers or were copied from a prized import. A local chieftain sees a foreign warrior's superior axe and commands his smiths to replicate it. The object inspires the technology. Experimental archaeologists show this by doing. They recreate ancient tools and use them. They demonstrate how a certain plowshare turns soil more efficiently, how a specific weave for a fish trap yields more catch. That practical efficiency was the engine of their spread. A better tool meant an easier life, a more reliable harvest, a stronger weapon. The advantages were universal. So artisans didn't just trade their wares, they traded the means of production. A merchant might carry raw copper ingots, a few fine bronze daggers as samples, and a set of the specialized stone molds used to cast them. The complete package, metallurgical analysis reveals this chain. Scientists examine a bronze object and find the copper ore came from Cyprus, but the tin alloyed with it came from Cornwall. And the object itself was cast using a technique common in Anatolia. The material journey and the knowledge journey captured in one artifact. This includes the profoundly specialized things. Loom weights standardized for a certain thread tension, distinctive fishing hooks forged for specific ocean fish, heavy iron plowshares that could break tough prairie soil. These weren't general goods, they were solutions to local problems, yet they traveled because their solution was so effective. Often, the technology moved with the person. The movement of a skilled artisan was the most direct form of transfer. A master ironworker from one kingdom, invited or captured by another, would bring his mental library of techniques. His personal toolkit, hammers, tongs, punches would be his passport. The spread of ironworking is the classic story. The Hittites of Anatolia mastered the production of quality steel. They guarded the knowledge, but when their empire fragmented, their smiths dispersed. The technology flowed into Greece, across the Mediterranean, and eventually into sub-Saharan Africa. In each new region, the tools and techniques adapted, but the core knowledge, how to achieve the searing heat, how to carburize the iron into steel, that was a seed carried on the wind of human movement. Look at the tools in your own kitchen drawer, a can opener, a vegetable peeler. Their design is universal, recognizable anywhere. That shared form is the endpoint of millennia of this same process. The best solution, circulating and becoming standard. This shared technological language, built by traded tools, created a common foundation. It built the infrastructure for daily life across cultures. And on that shared foundation of practical understanding, something more delicate could be built. Not just the trade of things for survival, but the trade of things for the mind. For play, the most ephemeral cargo of all began to move along these now established routes. A single blue glass bead, polished smooth, found in a tomb from Japan's Kofun period. It's a gaming piece identical to pieces used on Roman boards half a world away. How it got there is the question. That's the 20th artifact like this. Game pieces, toys, objects for leisure, they're artifacts of human connection at its most basic level, the shared need for play. A simple dice made from an animal's ankle bone, an astragalus turns up in ancient Mesopotamia. And then separately, in the pre-Columbian Americas, the idea might have traveled, or two cultures just invented the same solution to boredom. We might never know. But the movement of more complex games that charts a clear path. It follows the very trade routes we've been mapping. Games and their pieces spread through the most social layers of exchange. Merchants waiting in a caravanserai would play to pass the time. A sailor might teach a local child a game from his homeland, using pebbles and a board scratched in the sand. Children themselves were powerful vectors, carrying the rules of play from one household to another. A historian of games pointed out that the physical pieces, the dice, the counters, the board, they often travel faster and farther than the complete, formalized rules. The object arrives first as a curious novelty, then slowly the culture of how to use it seeps in, often blending with local traditions. Take chess. It began as chaturanga in 6th century India, a simulation of military strategy. Persian traders adopted it, called it shatranj. When the Islamic empires expanded, they carried the game across North Africa and into Spain. From there it entered medieval Europe, where the pieces evolved into the kings and queens and bishops we know today. Each move along the Silk Road left a mark on the game's design. The distribution of early chess pieces carved from ivory or precious wood is a map of this intellectual migration, or the Mesoamerican ball game that was far more than sport. It was ritual with profound cosmic significance. The heavy rubber balls used were themselves products of specialized trade. Rubber trees grew in specific lowland regions. The distinct stone hoop goals found at ceremonial sites across Central America show the game's cultural reach, a shared sacred practice made possible by regional exchange networks. The materials chosen for game pieces speak volumes. In ancient Rome, fine glass or jet counters meant wealth. In Viking Scandinavia, board games used pieces of amber or walrus ivory. Materials obtained through long-distance trade. A beautiful backgammon set in a medieval Islamic court might be inlaid with wood from India and ivory from Africa. The board itself was a display of global access, and the game played on it was a social bridge. That role as a social lubricant was crucial. In the multicultural ports of the Indian Ocean, a game like Mancala provided a common language. Its simple mechanics transcended speech. Archaeologists find Mancala boards carved into stone steps in East African ports, etched into the ruins of Indian trading posts. The game moved with people, a portable pastime that fostered interaction, eased the friction between strangers. Today the evidence is all around us. The global phenomenon of soccer, with its simple, universally understood rules, is the direct descendant of these ancient exchanges of play. Our modern board games and video games are hybrids, their mechanics and stories borrowed from cultures across the planet. That Roman glass piece in a Japanese tomb is a whisper. It tells us that along with spices and silk, prayers and pigments, our ancestors traded fun. They shared the means to forget the weight of the journey for a moment. To connect across a game board, this shared culture of leisure, of mental challenge and simple joy flowed alongside the commerce in necessities. And just as games accompanied life's journeys, another category of artifact was designed for life's final passage. The Roman glass bead was for play, the Celtic amulet was a shield, but some objects were chosen for a final journey. A polished bronze mirror from China's Han Dynasty ended up in a chieftain's tomb in Siberia. It wasn't meant for that northern light. It was placed there to go with someone into the afterlife, a luxury that traveled the steppe trade routes. That's the 21st category, funerary goods. Things buried with the departed. It's a specialized branch of ancient commerce, trading not just in materials but in beliefs about eternity. Take early Celtic burials in Britain. You find local weapons, pottery, and then you find these delicate beads and ornaments made of a vibrant red material. Analysis shows it's Mediterranean coral. From the warm seas, shaped by artisans maybe in Italy, carried over the Alps across the Channel. Why put something from so far away into the ground forever? Scholars of cultural practices around passing note that mortuary rituals are among the most conservative traditions a society has. They change slowly. So when a foreign object is included, it's a powerful statement. It means that item had acquired deep meaning. It wasn't just an exotic trinket. It was considered necessary or supremely fitting for the most important transition a person would make. These goods served multiple purposes. They were declarations of social status, showing the reach of the individual and their family. A Mesopotamian cylinder seal found in a grave in the distant Indus Valley speaks of a life involved in high-level exchange. They were provisions for the afterlife, reflecting specific beliefs about what would be needed next. Perfume oils from the Levant in Egyptian tombs, so the deceased always carried a sacred fragrance. Stone vessels for ointments, amulets for protection, model boats for spiritual travel. This assemblage is often called grave wealth, stored capital, removed from the living economy and placed into a permanent, symbolic bank. The presence of such items helps distinguish between different kinds of ancient connection. An Egyptian scarab in a Mycenaean Greek tomb from the Bronze Age. That could indicate direct trade between the palaces, or it could be a diplomatic gift passed between royal courts, kept as an heirloom for generations before finally being buried. Each possibility paints a different picture of the relationship. The graves along the Silk Road are the most vivid time capsules. A single burial might contain a Roman glass bowl, a Persian silver coin, an Indian ivory comb, a Chinese silk robe fragment. The person resting there was, in life, a nexus where continents met. Their final resting place is a snapshot of a connected world. So what single object would you choose to represent your connection to the global community in that context? Something that speaks of your place in the network of human exchange. These choices were deeply personal, yet they followed cultural scripts, the ultimate investment in identity, meant to last for eternity. And because they were deliberately hidden away, sealed in tombs, they often survived when cities above them crumbled. They became the preserved evidence of networks. And when those systems eventually faced collapse or transformation, they left their final inventories intact in the earth. That pot of silver, forgotten, buried in a field, it's a fossil. A perfect fossil of its moment, the Quedale hoard. They found it in England. It's Viking loot, but it's more than that. There were thousands of coins. Some from Anglo-Saxon mints, sure, but others came from farther away, from the Carolingian Empire, from the Abbasid Caliphate, all the way in Baghdad. Even dirhams from Central Asia, all of it mixed together in one clay pot, buried by a river around 905. This wasn't something that built up slowly in a town. This was a deliberate act, a secret act, a hoard, an emergency deposit. Someone facing a threat chose what was most vital to save, and they hid it. And they never came back. That failure, that they never retrieved it, that's our gain. It gives us a snapshot, a sudden, stark picture of what was moving through the world at that precise, panicked instant. Specialists they call hoards accidental archives. A town site builds up over centuries. A hoard is a single event frozen. Its contents were selected, curated for value and portability in a heartbeat. And the mix tells you a story. If it's all freshly minted, uniform coins that might be a state treasury, a tax collection. If it's a jumble hacked silver, broken jewelry, coins from a dozen lands, that's almost certainly a merchant's working capital. His mobile bank, buried when rumors of a raiding party reached the trading post. The reasons for hiding wealth, their windows into anxiety, imminent invasion, that's the classic trigger. But so was pilgrimage. A traveler might bury his wealth at the start of a long journey to a holy site, planning to dig it up when he returned. Sometimes it was just simple, prudent investment. A family's savings put away for a future that never arrived. Studying a hoard's context, its meticulous, the type of container, its depth, its location relative to old roads or landmarks. All these clues help reconstruct that last frantic act. And mapping hoards, it creates a chart of fear. Clusters of buried treasure along a coastline often mark the sudden advance of a feared fleet. Lines of hoards retreating inland can trace the path of an invading army. In the late Bronze Age, around the 12th century before the Common Era, a pattern emerges. From the Mediterranean to the Baltic, shipwrecks loaded with copper and tin ingots sink all around the same time. On land, hoards of valuable bronze tools and weapons get buried. And then, in many regions, the record just goes quiet. This convergence of evidence points toward a widespread collapse. A perfect storm of climate shifts, migration, conflict. It severed those trade networks for centuries. The hoards are the alarm bells ringing across continents. So you ask, in a moment of crisis, what would you save? Not the bulky furniture, not the everyday tools. You'd grab the small, dense packets of value, the heirlooms, the currency, the portable pieces of your world's connection. That instinct is ancient. It's the same instinct that created these accidental time capsules. They were meant for safety, but they became messages. Messages about what was truly valuable when everything else was at risk. This hidden commerce of crisis, this secretive act, it stands in contrast to the most public artifacts. Not the things that were buried, but the things that were built to last in plain sight. The monumental infrastructure that made the daily flow of everything else possible. That hidden silver was one secret node, but the network was made of stone. A caravanserai in the Syrian desert, just collapsed walls now, a pattern of rubble. Archaeologists sift that dust. They find more than local pottery. They find shattered celadon from China, tiny glass beads from India, worn copper coins minted in Byzantium. This ruin isn't just a stop, it's a fossilized intersection, one building that was a microcosm of the whole world. That's our 23rd category. The infrastructure itself. Ports, warehouses, paved roads. We think of trade as things moving, but first, people had to build the stage, and that stage, its bones, became the most telling artifact. Take the port of Berenike on Egypt's Red Sea coast. For centuries, it was Rome's gateway to the Indian Ocean. The sand there has given up a clutter. Pottery from southern France, Indian peppercorns, African ebony logs, a piece of silk from China, a Tamil Brahmi inscription scratched on a potsherd. This wasn't a curated collection. This was lost and broken debris, the litter of a global dockyard. It shows a system at a staggering scale. A sailor from Gujarat could walk the same streets as a merchant from Alexandria. Landscape archaeologists study this. They don't just look at objects, they look at how trade reshapes geography. A simple path, worn by generations of feet leading pack animals to a pass, can become a deep, entrenched gully. A seasonal river crossing, fortified with stone piers, becomes a permanent town. The shape of the land bears the scars of this constant flow. The infrastructure was the physical form of an economic idea. The idea that movement could be organized, secured, made profitable. The artifacts left at these way stations are wonderfully ordinary. They give us a democratic view. Not the gold of pharaohs, but the chipped cooking pot of a caravan cook, a worn gaming piece dropped between shipments, a broken sandal strap. These are echoes of the people who made the system work. The drivers, the guards, the porters, their lives were spent at these hubs, and their lost belongings paint a picture of a melting pot. You can almost hear the mix of languages in a courtyard at dusk, smell the different foods cooking over shared fires. Then there are the administrative artifacts, clay ceilings from bales of goods stamped with official marks, notched wooden tallies recording taxes paid. Standardized weights and measures kept by the station master. These boring, bureaucratic items were the glue. They provided the trust, so a merchant from one end of the earth could hand his cargo to a stranger from the other end. Even the construction materials were traded. The spread of Roman hydraulic concrete for harbor breakwaters is a map of technological influence. That knowledge and the special volcanic ash to make it traveled with engineers. From the Mediterranean to harbors on the Indian Ocean, the stones of a Silk Road caravanserai might be local, but the mortar recipe, the design for a vaulted roof to block the desert sun, those could be imports from 1,000 miles away. Think of a modern airport terminal, the same principle, a designed space where people from every continent mingle for a few hours. They leave behind a layer of international debris, magazines, currency, food wrappers. Future archaeologists digging up Heathrow would get a snapshot of 21st century global culture. Our airports are the caravanserais of the jet age. This stone and mortar network did more than move goods. It moved people, and with them, their words. The constant hum of interaction at these hubs required a common tongue. A lingua franca, so the infrastructure of trade built something even more enduring than roads. It built channels for language itself to flow. That graffiti in Petra. It's a conversation just frozen there in the stone. Some merchant, maybe bored, scrawled a line, and it mixes Greek letters with Aramaic phrases and the local Nabatean script. It's not vandalism, it's a snapshot, a linguistic one of a trading hub right in the middle of its day. That's our 24th category, the evidence of language itself. The words people used, the scripts, the sounds that moved along these routes, traces left behind as durable as any pot or coin. Take the Rosetta Stone. Its power isn't just that it unlocked hieroglyphs, it's the stone itself, a single decree, carved in 3 scripts, hieroglyphic, Demotic, and Greek. That trilingual text was a practical need for governing a multicultural Egypt, a place rich with trade under the Ptolemies. It was administrative infrastructure. Written in stone, so a message from the king would be understood by the priest, the bureaucrat, and the Greek-speaking merchant. That multilingualism was the operating system. For ancient commerce, words became artifacts, traded and transformed. Linguists track loanwords the way archaeologists track beads. The word sugar tells a story. It starts in ancient India, sarkara, meaning grit or gravel. Persian traders took it as shakar. Arabic carried it west as sakar. Medieval Latin made it sakarum. And from there it entered the languages of Europe. That one word clinging to the sweet thing it named. It maps the entire spread of a taste, from South Asia all the way to the Atlantic. It's the same with tea. In languages where the word is tea, like English or Spanish, it came by sea. From the Min Chinese dialect in Fujian, where it's chai, like in Russian or Swahili, it came overland. From the Mandarin cha, the path of the word shows the path of the trade route. These linguistic artifacts show up in physical ways, an inscription on a monument in southern India. Praising a local king, it might be written in flawless Sanskrit, a language of prestige and liturgy that came from far to the north. Its presence there signals something. The king was part of a broader pan-Indian cultural network, or a humble potsherd found at a Red Sea port, inscribed with Tamil Brahmi script. It reads a name. Conan may be a Tamil merchant found in Egypt. It's a direct signature, proof of a person from the coast of India living and working on the other side of the Indian Ocean. Similar Tamil inscriptions turn up in Thailand, marking the reach of these maritime traders. All this created lingua francas, common tongues for commerce. For centuries, Aramaic was the diplomatic and trade language of the Near East. From Egypt to Afghanistan, Greek became the common tongue of the Hellenistic world, the Eastern Roman Empire. A bridge for philosophy, science, business. Along the Swahili coast of East Africa, a Bantu language absorbed words from Arabic, Persian, Indian. It became the perfect linguistic blend for Indian Ocean trade. These languages were tools as essential as scales or sails. Even personal names on documents become clues. A tax record from Roman London, it might list a Lucius born locally. A Demetrius from Greece, a Barrets from Palmyra in Syria. The names are passports of origin, revealing the diverse population drawn to a commercial center. And the trade supported itself. The demand for papyrus, for parchment, for ink and style, that created its own industries, moving the very means of recording language across the known world. So you can pause for a moment, listen to your own speech, the coffee you drank this morning, the cotton of your shirt, the algebra in a spreadsheet, the typhoon on the news. These words from Arabic, Hindi, Greek, Chinese, they're living artifacts in your mouth. They're echoes of ancient marketplaces, of deals struck between strangers who had to find a common way to say price and quality and trust. This Babel of commerce wasn't chaos, it was a system, a brilliant, adaptive system for connection, and the forces that pushed this system into being. That opened some routes and closed others. They're often recorded not in human language, but in the silent, layered language of the earth itself. The graffiti in Petra was a human conversation. But the Earth has been keeping a ledger, a much older one, an ice core drilled deep into Greenland. In its frozen layers, a story, bands of ice from the height of the Roman Empire, and in them distinct spikes. Spikes of atmospheric lead. This heavy metal, it didn't just fall from the sky. It was a signature, a global signature, a ghost in the atmosphere from the massive Roman silver mines. From Rio Tinto in Spain, the smelting process released lead into the air, and prevailing winds carried it north, deposited it year after year on the distant ice of Greenland. That ice core is a silent witness to an industrial scale of production and trade that written records only hint at. This is the category environmental proxies. Geochemical signatures, the natural world itself becomes the artifact. It records the planetary footprint of human connection. These are indirect archives. Independent of human memory, take the mud at the bottom of African lakes, sediment cores pulled from these depths. It's like flipping through pages of a history book, but written in pollen and dust. In layers from the 8th or 9th century, researchers found something, microscopic pollen grains from plants like the Asian bottle gourd, the banana. Crops domesticated in Southeast Asia, in the Pacific, finding their pollen in Africa centuries before European ships arrived. It suggests an earlier exchange. An indirect exchange across the Indian Ocean. Maybe the plants traveled with traders. Maybe seeds were carried by currents, by birds, but their presence is a biological clue. A clue to pre-colonial contact. Climate historians use these natural artifacts to build timelines that complement the archaeological record and sometimes challenge it. A peat bog in Europe might preserve a layer of charcoal from a massive forest fire, possibly linked to land cleared for agriculture to feed growing trade towns. The chemistry of soil in an Andean valley might show a sudden change, indicating intensive maize cultivation. not for local eating but for provisioning. For state-sponsored trade expeditions, even animal bones tell this story. At a caravan stop in the Negev desert, the remains of donkeys show a diet rich in cultivated barley. Far beyond what the local environment could provide, this tells us these work animals were being specially foddered. Their grain was shipped in to sustain the vital flow of goods. The most precise proxies come from geochemistry. We saw how lead isotopes in an ingot can trace it to a mine. That same principle works on a planetary scale. The lead in that Greenland ice didn't just signal pollution. Its specific isotopic fingerprint could be matched to the ore bodies in Spain. This allows scientists to quantify the scale. The scale of ancient industry. They can see production ramp up during periods of imperial expansion and coinage, and see it drop during times of crisis or plague. It's a macroeconomic chart written in atoms. This evidence appears in surprising places. In the Great Lakes region of North America, scientists studying ancient atmospheric pollution. They found copper particles, other trace metals, in ice cores and lake sediments from the pre-Columbian era. The timing and location point to indigenous copper mining, to processing activities long before European contact, on a scale that left a mark on the environment. This reshapes our understanding of industry in the Americas, showing it was significant enough to have a regional atmospheric impact. So we have to ask, what will future environmental scientists deduce about our own era? From the layers we are laying down right now, the geological record of the 20th and 21st centuries will show a dramatic spike, radioactive isotopes from atomic tests. A permanent layer of microplastics, a sharp curve in carbon dioxide concentrations. These are our civilization's signatures, written not on clay or parchment, but in the very chemistry of the planet. These planetary scale records bring us to the edge of detection, showing that our networks of exchange have always been more than lines on a map. They are forces. Forces that reshape the Earth's surface and its atmosphere. And as we push our methods to their limits, we begin to look for the most subtle links of all. Not in objects or words or environmental layers, but in the shared stories, the mythologies that traveled along these same routes. The laser pulse lasts a nanosecond. It vaporizes a microscopic spot on the pottery. In that flash of plasma, a story gets told. That's laser-induced breakdown spectroscopy. You have a scientist, but not in a trench. In a lab coat with a handheld device that looks like a futuristic scanner, it reads an object's elemental fingerprint instantly. This is the new frontier. Our 26th category isn't an object dug up, it's the data stream. These modern analytical techniques, they've become the most powerful overlooked artifacts. They're the keys that finally fit the locks on history's silent doors. Take the portable XRF device, X-ray fluorescence. It looks like a bulky cordless drill. A conservator can point it at a Viking brooch in a museum case. No sample taken, not a single scratch. It beams low-energy X-rays at the metal. The atoms in the brooch respond. They emit their own unique fluorescent X-rays. In seconds, a screen shows the exact percentages. Silver, copper, gold, trace elements. That chemical profile can be matched to known ore sources. And suddenly, that brooch isn't just from Scandinavia. Its silver whispers it came from mines in the Islamic Caliphate, hundreds of miles to the south. The analysis happens in a basement storage room. The artifact never leaves its shelf. A materials scientist once said techniques like these are as vital as the excavation itself. The dirt is the context, but the science is the translation. It lets the object speak a language we can finally understand. So how do they work in plain terms? Think of it as material fingerprinting. Every substance has a unique chemical or structural signature. These tools read those signatures. Raman spectroscopy, for instance. It shines a laser on a sample and measures how the light scatters. The way the light's energy changes tells you about the molecular bonds present. It can identify a specific pigment on a faded mural, or confirm a medicinal resin inside a hollow amulet. Strontium isotope analysis is different. Strontium is an element in bedrock. It gets into the soil, the water, the plants, finally into the teeth and bones of animals and people. The ratio of strontium-87 to strontium-86 in a tooth enamel is a direct record, the geology where that person grew up. It's a geological passport. The toolkit is vast, specialized. Ancient DNA analysis can recover genetic material from bones, even from the calculus on teeth, revealing ancestry and migration. Lipid residue analysis extracts invisible fats trapped in the pores of a cooking pot. It tells you whether it last held fish oil, dairy, or olive oil. 3D modeling and photogrammetry create perfect digital replicas of artifacts or entire excavation sites, allowing infinite study without handling the fragile originals. But these methods have limits. Ancient DNA is easily contaminated. Residue analysis only tells you the last major thing cooked in a pot, not its entire history. And these techniques are expensive. They require teams of specialists, yet when applied, they routinely overturn assumptions. The long debate about pre-Columbian transoceanic contact. It's now fueled by hard data, not speculation. The discovery of ancient chicken bones in Chile with Polynesian DNA, or the sweet potatoes genomic trail from the Americas across the Pacific. These are clues read by science, not legend. Consider a more specific triumph. For years, archaeologists found beautiful brass objects in Viking hoards. Brass is an alloy of copper and zinc, but where did the zinc come from? Europe had few good sources. Then researchers began analyzing the isotopes of zinc in these artifacts. The isotopic signature matched zinc ores from a specific region, the medieval Islamic world in Central Asia. The data drew a clear line. The Vikings weren't just raiding for silver. They were connected to a sophisticated metallurgical trade network, one that reached the heart of Asia. The brass itself carried that proof, but only a mass spectrometer could hear it. So we have to ask, looking around at our own world filled with complex objects, what future technology will reveal? What global links are woven into the smartphone in your hand? Or the synthetic fibers of your jacket that we are currently blind to? Perhaps a future device will read the history of stress and transport in the molecular structure of a plastic, tracing its journey from refinery to landfill. This scientific lens does more than answer old questions. It reframes our entire understanding. It teaches us to look for stories not just in things, but in the very atoms they are made of. It prepares us for the final, overarching view, to step back and see not just the individual threads, but the magnificent, interconnected tapestry they've woven across time. Science can read the language of atoms, but the story it tells is a human story. You find Egyptian glass in a Viking grave. You find Pacific shells in a desert pueblo. The evidence is everywhere. Our history isn't a story of isolation. It's a story of constant connection, surprising connection. We've looked at 26 kinds of artifacts. Things people overlook. Each one is a single thread, but you weave them together and they form this tapestry, a vast, intricate tapestry of ancient globalization. These humble objects, a bead, a peppercorn, a worn millstone, a trace of DNA, these are the real mapmakers. They show us trade links that spanned continents. Millennia before Columbus, millennia before Magellan, they challenged the textbook narrative, the one about separate civilizations, each developing on its own. They show us a different world, a world where innovation flowed, artistic style flowed, spiritual belief, everyday technology. They moved along these invisible highways. And those highways weren't forged just by empires. They were forged by merchants, by pilgrims, by sailors and diplomats, people looking for profit or purpose. or just a new horizon. This interconnectedness was the norm. It was the background hum of human progress, the quiet, constant hum. So next time you're in a museum, pause. Look past the gold, look past the big statues, look closer at the case with the ordinary things, the broken pottery, the bundle of rusted nails, the small, faded bead. Ask a simple question: where did the material for this come from? The answer might hold a key to a journey, one that crosses mountains and deserts and seas. This is an invitation, really, to see that interconnectedness in your own world, the spices in your kitchen, the fabric of your clothes, the words you use. They're all chapters in the same long story. If this look at hidden history resonated with you, we hope you'll join us for more journeys into the past. Let us know in the comments which artifact story amazed you the most. The past isn't silent, it's speaking through these objects. We just have to learn how